Hi, everyone. My name is Jonathan Hughes, and thanks for joining me on this special reissue of the MEFA Podcast. We're going to hear a conversation that I had in March of last year, that is, March of 2021, with Drew Carter, the Senior Associate Director of College Admissions at College of the Holy Cross. This episode is for those students who are finishing their junior years in high school and just beginning their college search and application process, maybe taking a first stab at that college essay. And this is 5 ways that high school juniors can strengthen their college admissions application. So if that applies to you, you want to hear this. Drew, welcome to the show.
Great to be here, Jonathan, and it's great to be here to talk about one of my favorite topics, which is, how high school juniors can actively play a role in strengthening their application for college.
Yeah, so everybody wants to know how they can strengthen their application, and we usually identify junior year as the year when the college search and the application process really begins in earnest. And so what we have today are 5 ways that juniors can strengthen their college application. So let's get right to it. What's the first one?
And the first I want to start with is the teacher recommendations. I think sometimes students think that teacher recommendations just pop out of nowhere. They can't imagine what would be in those recommendations, and they don't know where teachers get the words to write those recommendations. But the reality is that most teacher recommendations are written after the student's junior year in high school. And those recommendations are filled with observations, anecdotes, and adjectives that have been witnessed during the second half of the student's junior year. The most recent, the most relevant when the teacher's writing that recommendation. It sounds cheesy to say it, but students create their own recommendation by the way in which they conduct themselves in class. And that could be virtually, if a student is attending school virtually. It could be in a hybrid model, or it could be in person. Students literally create their own recommendations with how they conduct themselves. So I often tell students, if you want your teacher recommendation to say that you're hardworking, give the teachers that content, show them a hardworking student on a daily basis. If you want your recommendation to say you're thoughtful and sensitive to the needs of others, then give them that content. And it is a great exercise for students to think about 2 or 3 qualities that they would like reflected in their recommendations. And once they've identified those, demonstrate those qualities on a daily basis. And I promise you will make that teacher's job of writing that recommendation so much easier.
How many letters of recommendation are students going to have to supply?
I mean, I think what we see most commonly, and it's kind of what I generally recommend, is whatever the college requires plus 1. So some colleges are going to require none. Some colleges are going to require 1. I don't know that there are many that still require 2, but I think getting the required plus 1 is a great idea. Obviously, the most important part is how well that teacher knows you. So it really is the content of that recommendation that's the most important. And I also, really recommend to students to ask in the proper way. Don't make it a passing comment at the end of class one day. Ask in the right way. Do it in writing, whether it's preferably an email, or if you do it in person, make an appointment to speak with that teacher and explain to them why you've asked them. And then here's the key part. Here's the way to seed your recommendation. If that teacher agrees to write your recommendation, write them a thank you note. You have just created the first piece of content for their recommendation. You are a thoughtful student.
Excellent. Okay, so let's go to number 2.
Okay, the second part is to understand that when a college admission office looks at a high school student's transcript, on average, they will look at 3.25 years. Freshman year, sophomore year, junior year, senior fall. Some schools will only look at 3 years. Some schools will look at 3.5. I'm going to sort of split the difference there and say 3.25. So every course selection, every course level, every grade is under consideration by the admission office. But the most important part of that transcript is the road that lies ahead. You absolutely control the effort and energy that you put into the classroom this spring and next fall. Because while colleges look at a student's entire transcript, we know that the student we get, the student we will inherit, the student that will enroll, matriculate, and show up as a first-year student on our campus will most closely resemble the student that we see at the end of the transcript. So all of the victories and defeats that lie behind you on the transcript, let them go. What matters to you is the road that lies ahead. You have absolute control over the lingering, powerful aftertaste to your transcript. And it very often creates a lean in the application if you've really hit your stride academically. If you've showed colleges that you are starting to identify areas of interest and maybe excelling in those areas. If you've showed colleges that you have rebounded from past missteps in a perceived area of weakness and improved your performance. If you've showed colleges that as your courses get more difficult, your performance rises to that level. Show colleges the type of student that they want on their campus and create that image at the end.
And now we move on to our third tip, which relates to a topic that causes a lot of anxiety for students, which is their essay.
Students and their families waste a lot of time thinking about what they think we in the admissions world want them to write their essay about. I will answer that question for you. No one in the admissions world cares one bit what you write your essay about. Great essays every year on silly, silly topics. And we read awful essays on what the guidebooks would identify as a great topic. We read great essays every year about grandmas, and we read terrible essays every year about grandmas. I keep a list every year of my favorite essays I've read. Okay? And on one year's list, there's probably about 20 essays. I keep the name of the student. I keep where they went to high school, kind of helps me remember. And then I keep the topic of their essay. So let's say about 20 on a list for 1 year. I've been doing this job for 17 years. Jonathan, if I were to show you that list, would you be interested in students' names? Would you be interested in like where they went to high school?
No.
Not so much. Would you be interested in looking at the titles, the subjects of these essays? What appears most common? And I'm going to tell you about 10% of those subjects of these, the best essays I've ever read, are what you might imagine. The house fire my family survived, cancer, like really momentous, life-changing topic. That's about 10%. About 90% of the best essays I read in almost 2 decades are on much smaller topics. What it's like to swim in the ocean that one day in July. Why mow the lawn for my family at my house? My favorite pair of shorts. Okay, these are topics that sort of the outside world would say, "Oh, that's going to create a great essay." But the reality is, those were topics that the student wanted to write about. And trust me when I say this, and this leads to the next point. You choose the topic of your essay. You just might have fun writing the essay. And that's the fourth part that you control of your application process. It's the experience that you have in writing that essay. And let me tell you this, I can convince you of the importance of enjoying writing your essay in one sentence. You enjoy writing that essay, we will enjoy reading the essay. And the big challenge, what creates so much anxiety with high school students, is that they have spent their entire high school career writing essays for a really well-known audience. They write essays for their English teacher and their history teacher. And these are people that they've worked with for months, if not years. These are people who detail their expectations, give students feedback, work on rough drafts with them. And then all of a sudden, at the end of their high school career, during their senior year, they write what is perceived as the most important paper of their academic career, their college essay. And they write this for a complete stranger, someone they've never met, someone of whom does not explain their expectations, and someone that they have no ability to anticipate their reaction. And to that last point, I say students are wrong. You have an absolute ability to predict our reaction. Our reaction when reading your essay is the feeling you have, is your experience when writing the essay. Look in the mirror when you're writing your essay. That is our reaction. Are you pulling your hair out writing that essay? Probably going to pull our hair out reading your essay. Is it boring, mind-numbingly boring to write that essay? It's going to feel like that to read the essay. That's the bad news. The good news is that if you find enjoyment, we will find enjoyment. If you find meaning, we will find meaning. If you find mojo, if you find something good when writing that essay, that's what we will find. all of this originates from choosing a topic that you want to write about. That is not the topic the guidebook says you should write about, not the topic your older sibling wrote about a few years ago when he or she was applying to college, and not, most importantly, not the topic your mother thinks you should write about. All of those are perfectly fine topics. They are not your best topic. Best topic is the topic you want.
And so what the point of the essay should be then? This is something that we talked about earlier. And I wonder if you could state it for everyone.
Students so often think that the essay has to tell us everything. And I think students understand essays so often turn into brag letters. They turn into sort of their resume in prose format. They feel like their opportunity to convince the reader that they should be admitted. And I get why that is the motivation for so many students, but the reality is they don't have the experience of reading an application, because if they did, they would understand we are filled with reasons of why that student should be admitted. A third of the student's file is filled with brag letters about them. That might be weird to a student, but the teacher recommendations and the guidance counselor recommendation, they are filled with adjectives that are laudatory and incredible stories about why you should be admitted. You don't need to convince us you should be admitted. What you need to do is prove that you can write and prove that you can write about yourself. But let me tell you, having just finished this process for this year, reading applications is not fun. I love my job, but reading applications, I am not sitting in a leather chair next to a roaring fire with a couple folders on my lap and a pencil with a sleeping dog next to me. I'm at a computer with multiple screens and spreadsheets and data entry and CEB codes and GPAs, and it is mind-numbingly boring. And let's pretend, for the sake of this visual, that it takes 20 minutes to read a student's application. It doesn't, it's quicker than that, but let's pretend. Let's say it takes 20 minutes. The first 18 minutes, it's semi-focused data entry and processing. And then the last 2 minutes is when we get to the essay. And that's the part where we get to minimize the spreadsheet, turn the calculator off, put our pencil down, we get to sit back and just read. It is our favorite part of reading the application. Your essay, it's the ice cream at the end of the math homework. That's why we've done that in 18 minutes. And throughout those 18 minutes, we've been thinking about getting to the ice cream, getting to the essay. And let me be clear, because I'm getting fired up here talking about essays. It is not the most important part of your application to us in the admission world. That will always be your academic profile. But the essay might just be one of the most important parts of your file to you, because it is completely blank at this point. If you're a high school junior, it is the only part of your application that is completely blank. You have absolute control over it. And your image of that admissions reader for your essay should not be of the curmudgeonly old professor with a red marker looking for your misplaced comma. That's not the reality, it's the truth. The real image is of that person who just finished their math homework. They got to turn the calculator off. They got to minimize the spreadsheet. They got to sit back in their chair, and they just got to read. Jonathan, you would love reading these things. It is a free topic posed to kids from all over the world at the same moment in their life. Some of them are hilarious. Some of them heartbreaking, but they are a little tiny glimpse, because we spend those first 18 minutes hearing about the student. And then for the very first time, we get to hear directly from the student.
I'm sure after reading all those essays, the ones that really stand out are the ones where the students had the most fun in writing those essays too.
Absolutely. It's not, I think sometimes students feel like they have to have had something traumatic happen to them. And I'm going to tell you, I will tell you about my favorite essay I read this year. Mm-hmm. It was a girl who just talked about her dad. And it was just her talking about her dad and how he's kind of funny and how he kind of embarrasses her sometimes, and how she's kind of come to kind of learn that her dad is kind of embarrassing sometimes, but he's very sweet and he loves her very much. And you could tell it was an experience she really found value in and she found fun in. And it was authentic and heartfelt. And it wasn't the best written essay I read this year, but it was the best essay.
Excellent. All right. Now, as much as I'm loath to do it, let's move on to the final point that we have. And this has to do with the search process itself.
So one of the buzzwords in the world of college admissions right now is demonstrated interest. Some schools utilize it in their application review. Some schools don't utilize it, but very often families don't even understand what it is. So let me tell you first off what it is. Demonstrating interest is opportunities that students have to engage with the search process with a particular college. So it might be a tour, whether in person or virtual, open house events, whether in person or virtual, interviews in person or over Zoom, any of those engagement opportunities. Now, some schools are going to collect that information and add that to the student's file, and it might help to strengthen your application. So those are opportunities you want to take advantage of. At the very same time, do not waste your time trying to figure out which schools do track demonstrated interest and which schools do not. Because in the cases where a school doesn't track demonstrated interest, you still win. By thoughtfully engaging in the search process, you learn more about yourself. You learn more about the variety of colleges and universities out there, the variety of programs available to you, and it gives you more points of comparison to really become a sophisticated consumer in the world of college. So you definitely want to take advantage of these opportunities. But let me make an important point. This is not a points tallying system. It's not as if each time you demonstrate your interest, you get a point. And if you get enough points, you get in. That's literally not the point. You want to make sure that at every school to which you've applied, you've shown them that you're interested in some way other than just applying. I think personal engagement is the best when that's available, right? The school offers you the opportunity to take a virtual tour or a virtual information session or even a virtual interview. Virtual interviews or in-person interviews, when those were or might soon again be available, those are great opportunities to bring your application from 2 dimensions to 3 dimensions. Now, not every school offers interviews, but you certainly want to be looking at the schools you're interested in, finding out if they offer interviews, and if you do, how do you get an interview? Usually interviews are offered through the summer and in the fall of the student's senior year. That's not something to do now, but it's something to look forward to. And it is just one of many ways that you can thoughtfully engage in the search process. It is highly possible and likely that you will be able to demonstrate your engagement to a college. It has actually never been easier in so many ways. Colleges have completely transformed their recruitment efforts from almost complete on-campus programming, and now admission offices have turned into television production studios, and they're producing incredible volumes of content and ways for you to engage with admissions officers, with current students, with tour guides, with students from individual academic departments. It is our job to help educate students and parents, and in some ways that they are consumers. And every admissions office is transformed. I've been really impressed with our profession, what universities have done. And the last thing I'll say about that is that because of the virtual space for admission recruitment, you are now freed up in so many ways to learn about colleges that are not in your immediate geographic vicinity. If you want to attend an information session at Reed College in Oregon a year and a half ago, you would have had to fly across country. Now, these information sessions are free, open to the public, and you can learn about colleges all over the country, if not all over the world. So I would really encourage you to revisit college admissions websites because they have really changed a lot, and there's incredible programming available to you.
Drew Carter, I can't thank you enough for coming on. It was great as always.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Thanks again to Drew Carter for sharing his thoughts with us. Remember, if you like the show and you want to hear more from MEFA on all topics related to planning, saving, and paying for college and career readiness and reaching financial goals, please subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, wherever you get your podcasts from. And please remember to rate and review us so we can keep doing what we're doing and getting this information in front of people like you. Thanks to our producer, Sean Connolly, our editor, Lauren Patton. And once again, my name is Jonathan Hughes, and this has been the MEFA Podcast.